Hey guys, welcome back to the SNR podcast. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're starting a new series. We're going to be calling 4x1. If you've ever been to a track meet in your life, you've watched the 4x100 meter relay, and it's a quick four-person race. Each person runs 100 meters. It's a quick race. It's over before you know it. And so what we're going to do in this series is we're just going to take four topics, spend about a minute on each of those things, hit on them real quick, and then move on. And so just give you something that you can watch, catch in, on just a short little break or whatever it might be, just in a few minutes. And so today we're going to jump in with our first episode of this 4x1. And the first topic I want to talk about is, a lot of people have been talking about it right now. The NFL draft is right around the corner. And there are a million things that are going to be said and debated between now and when the draft gets here. Lots of different things. But we all know the main thing that we want to talk about when it comes to the NFL draft is quarterbacks. Who's going first? Where are they going? Who should be at the top, and everybody wants to debate this every year when it comes to the NFL draft. It's the most important position in football, and so really this year, the two guys that to me are separated, and I think this is kind of the general consensus as well, the two guys that have separated themselves from the rest of the class are clearly Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. And then earlier today, I'm recording this at 11 p.m. On Saturday night, March 10th, and so. Earlier today, the Carolina Panthers make a trade up to the number one pick, and so likely to position themselves to get one of those two guys. And so it's going to be clear, I think, that Carolina and Houston are going to end up with either Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. But it's been talked about, time and time again. We compare these guys' college careers to try to project what they're going to turn out to be in the NFL, and it's almost impossible to guess this right every time. But I will say one thing: these guys have the pedigree, these guys have the potential. Bryce has got some major questions as far as just size and those sort of things, but I do think that he's a guy who's a proven winner, a proven leader, a guy that Saban really, really trusted, not just with his ability on the field, but also just the way that he was going to lead and be a guy that was going to play the quarterback position the right way. C.J. Stroud, I think, answered a lot of the physical questions in the college football playoff, proved that he's a better runner than a lot of people thought that he was. And so I think that he really probably has the highest ceiling of these two guys just because he has all of the physical tools. But the next thing that I want to jump into is we're going to continue to beat the dead horse that is the NBA when it comes to load management. So over this past couple of weeks, and really in this past few days even, there has just been this wave of injuries across the NBA, and specifically headlined by Kevin Durant in a warm-up line, rolling his ankle. Looks like he's going to be out somewhere in the 3 to 6 week range, likely the rest of the regular season, maybe even a little bit into the first bit of the playoffs. And so I think that this brings in a few quick ideas and things that I wanted to share as I start to think about the load management. It doesn't matter how much you rest a guy. There's injuries happen, things happen, and so so much of this load management is to be able to save these players, to prepare them, to make sure they're around when the playoffs happen. But the reality is, if they play at all, that there's going to be a chance of getting hurt. It's part of the game. It happens. And I was actually listening to a podcast earlier this week, and Paul George made the comment that he actually thinks that all of the resting and all of the sitting has actually had an adverse effect and even causing there to be maybe more injuries because the body just isn't prepared, isn't equipped, isn't always prepared for the level of intensity that is an NBA game. With this Kevin Durant injury, it wasn't even in the NBA game. It's literally in a layup line. And so things happen. And so to me, it's just even more proof that we need these guys. Just play. It's your job. It's what you're paid to do. Charles Barkley's mentioned it several times over the last couple of weeks. Like, you're paid millions and millions of dollars to play this game. You can't play 3 or 4 nights a week. And so I think they ought to play. Injuries happen. They're part of the game. It has been from the beginning. Just play the game, and then however it shakes out, it shakes out. And so I think that this past week or so, with just the freak accidents that we've seen and some of the injuries that have shaken out, there's not much you can control anyway, and so there's no point in trying to balance all that out with load management. The other kind of big thing that happened this past week in the sports world, UFC 285, John Jones makes his long-awaited comeback to the UFC after a 3-year hiatus. And so fought last in early 2020, comes back here, fights, and doesn't just come back to the UFC and fight where he had basically established himself as the greatest light heavyweight of all time, but instead comes back to fight as a heavyweight, to jump up, fights at about 30, 40 pounds heavier than he's ever fought before. Takes on Cyril Gane, who's he was the number one contender in the heavyweight class, and dominates. He wins in under 3 minutes and really kind of solidifies, puts another bullet point on his resume as the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, and really looks like now that sets up perfectly for a fight coming up probably with Stipe Miocic in the next several months. Looks like July might be a likely landing spot for that, and so I think that will really be a chance for, if John Jones beats Stipe Miocic, there's no more argument he is the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, because Stipe is is arguably the best heavyweight ever in the UFC, and so if John can come and dominate there and be able to beat Miocic, I think that puts the final kind of exclamation point on his career as a fighter. I know there's been lots of outside of the octagon and personal life stuff with John Jones, but if you're just looking at his resume as a fighter, I think in my opinion, he's already solidified himself as the greatest of all time, but this could really kind of put all the doubters, really just kind of shut all of those guys up, as if he could pull off this fight against Miocic. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on today is March Madness is right around the corner, and we're finally here. We've all been waiting for it, and so as I mentioned, this is 11 o'clock on Saturday night. My Texas Longhorns just won the Big 12 Conference semifinal game, sets them up for a matchup with Kansas, a game that if they win that, they might slide themselves into a number 1 seed. And so really excited. I think this is just a wide open field this year. This is the landscape of college basketball has changed a lot over the last couple of years, as different routes to the NBA and some of the best players around the world, not necessarily best amateur players, not necessarily going the college route. And so there's some different ways that things are shaking out, but I really think this is going to lend to a tournament where just there's going to be a ton of teams that have a legitimate shot. But I will go ahead and say that I expect the Big 12 to dominate in this tournament. I think just watching Big 12 basketball this year, it's the deepest conference in college basketball by far. These teams have gone through an absolute gauntlet over the last month or so in conference play. And so I think that they are all probably so excited. These Big 12 teams are just ready to see somebody that's not a Big 12 team as they get to jump into the NCAA tournament. And so I'm excited about what that's going to turn out to be, but I think it's going to be a great one. We're in for a treat. So make sure to like, subscribe to the Sports News Relay podcast here on YouTube, and check out future episodes. We've got a lot of new content coming in the next few weeks. But thanks for listening, guys. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Hey, if you've enjoyed watching this, make sure to check out Radio Faith's other podcast, Saved and Tatted, hosted by Charles. You don't want to miss it. Go subscribe today. Saved and Tatted show on YouTube. If I can say the word YouTube.
We'll be here for 3 minutes. Go check Charles Saved.
Yes. I've gotten more used to it now because of stuff with the church. But it's dumb. Like, I could say it 100 times, like if I'm not trying to say it scripted, like in front of a camera. But then it's like,
I'll be in my car. Hurry, get you a piece. He looked at the kolaches and he was like, do I want to eat another kolache or do I wait till the pizza's done?